A final reason why we should get excited about insects and insect ecology in general is that insects are an additional set of reasons why we should get excited about insects in general and insect ecology in particular is that insects play really important roles in our ecosystems and in our food webs. And some of these, an additional reason why we should be excited about insects in general and insect ecology in particular is that insects play a diversity of really important roles in our ecosystems. For example, they have an immense amount of biomass. If you go to the tropics, one estimate has it that the biomass of just ants, if you took all the ants and you swept them all up and you put them in a giant container and you weighed them, their biomass would be 4 times that of all the vertebrates in the same area. And if you include all other insects, not just ants, this would be an almost 10-to-1 ratio. There's an order of magnitude more biomass of insects than there are of vertebrates. And we tend to put a lot of emphasis on things with backbones. So you can imagine that because of all this biomass, that biomass has to be created somehow. Insects are feeding on other things, and they have therefore an immense capacity to transform the environment. Here's a study that kind of illustrates a little bit of this based on some work that we did in Iceland. This is in the subarctic, just below the Arctic Circle, at an amazing lake that I'll get a chance to tell you a little bit about later. But this lake is famous for emergences of aquatic insects that have been feeding on the algae and on other organisms in the bottom of this lake, other primary producers in the bottom of this lake, and then they come out as giant swarms of during particular times of the year to mate, to reproduce, and so on. And these insects act as food for predators on land, for things like spiders, for things like harvestmen, decomposers. A lot of their bodies actually die and end up in the soil. Decomposers like mites and collembola will mash up their bodies. Microbes get their little jaws on them and start to break them down. The nutrients are released and they get taken up by plants. And so insects play this incredible role in this particular system here in moving nutrients that used to be in the lake to the terrestrial system. And in the process, fuel an entirely different ecosystem that you would have without it. Insects can be incredibly abundant in some areas. Here's just a headline that I did a quick search on having to do with locusts. These are big grasshopper-like things that, when the conditions are right in certain parts of the world, will actually shift from their solitary phase. Normally, grasshoppers just kind of mind their own business, feeding on plants. But when the conditions are right, they switch to a gregarious phase. There's an entire physiological shift in their bodies, and they swarm by the billions across continents even, where they wreak havoc on crops, but in the process also move a lot of biomass from one area to the next. So this is just something that I have a personal fascination with, is places and instances where insects can be so abundant so as to transform our terrestrial systems. Because of their propensity to eat plants, as I mentioned in the previous video, they have an incredibly important role to play in our agricultural systems. So here is an example of the estimated potential crop losses before harvest due to various things like weeds, plant diseases, plant pathogens, and insects. And by this estimate here, which is a bit old, 97, insects compete with our food to the tune of about 13% of the biomass that we would normally want to harvest. This is Colorado potato beetle, one of the most devastating herbivores in potato crops. This is a weevil here that's feeding, I think, on bolls of cotton, for example. Obviously, that 13% average varies a lot. With which crops you're talking about and which parts of the world you're talking about, and it has an incredible impact on local communities where in places where you have subsistence farming, the loss of even 15 to 20% of your crop could be the difference between being able to feed your family and not. So these are important organisms in these environments. In other places where control mechanisms can be put into place, this is still a costly endeavor for farmers that have to apply insecticides or other forms of control because of the farming systems that we've created. You have outbreaks of insects that are quite costly economically, but also costly to human health. Having a lot of pesticides in the environment has a cost for human health as well. Interestingly, those numbers of 10, 13, 15% insect loss has stayed pretty constant over the years. So despite all these new technologies, bioengineered crops and insecticides, we still have a lot of loss of biomass due to insects. Insects also provide a range of things that we refer to as services, ecosystem services. This is a very anthropomorphic way of kind of categorizing the benefits that nature provides to people. But nevertheless, we've often categorized these. Nevertheless, insects provide a lot of these valuable services for free for people, including the control of pests. Like you can see this lady beetle here feeding on an aphid. Pollination services, the movement of pollen from male to female parts of the plant that causes for some plants successful fruit production. The decomposition of dead material. Here you can see a dung beetle hauling away dung deposited by some mammalian herbivore. This is probably an elephant here, but you see the same kind of process happening in pastures and rangelands, in many grasslands in temperate areas, North America. And recreation as well. There are lots of reasons and recreation as well. There are many people who get excited about seeing other organisms like birds that feed on insects as one of their primary food resources. If you go fishing, there are many fish like trout that feed extensively on aquatic insects, and these are sources of recreation and also important for inland fisheries and things like that. So we're going to spend some time in the class actually talking about the services that insects play out and how the way that we manage our landscapes and the way that we can manage our agricultural and urban systems could affect the ability of organisms to actually carry out these important services. And in addition to services, there are also disservices that insects play out. I already talked about the competition with us for crops. You also see an interaction between insects and people through the spread of zoonotic diseases like West Nile virus or other viruses that are held here in animal hosts as their primary hosts, but that are also transmitted to humans and can cause all kinds of issues, disease, and sometimes even mortality for humans. Malaria is a case in point. One of the largest killers of people, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, is a mosquito-borne pathogen. So there's lots of reasons to study insect ecology. Besides their diversity and numbers, which give all kinds of there are all kinds of reasons to study insect ecology, and I hope I've convinced you that some of these are worthy. Insects are incredibly diverse in both the number of types that there are and how abundant they are, and there's a lot to learn about this. Insect lineages go back a long ways. They have an ancient history on this planet, and therefore the evolution of insects and the evolution of other organisms like plants this is an amazing place to study these particular role interactions. They play important aspects. They play important roles in our food webs, consuming primary production, and as predators, they consume things like pests. And therefore, they affect the economics of some of our systems, in particular our agricultural systems. On the same token, they also carry out a series of on the opposite side of that coin. They also play out on the opposite side of that coin. They also carry out a series of really important functions that we as humans benefit from, things that we refer to as ecosystem services. And finally, they actually can have direct human health effects through the spread of pathogens. And we're going to touch on all of these different aspects within this class.